Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining the webinar. Let me keep the comments open in case there's something. Um, yeah, the image will become clear in a moment why I've used this one. It's an image that if you're a long-term attendee of our webinars, you might have seen it before because it's one of my favorite concepts. Yeah, I'll explain in a moment what Stigmergy has to do with any of this. Welcome everyone. This is going to be our recurring strategy webinar about developer portals. It's kind of like a monthly check-in, approximately, where I talk about some of the things that I've been learning in the community over the last couple of weeks or months. And it's like a recurring conversation where I'm sharing some of the new things that I've learned. So one of the key events this month, or the last month and a half, was the DITA conference that I attended in Brussels, where there was where I was attending to learn a bit more about minimalism and what's going on with minimalism and AI, knowledge graphs and things like that. And some of that, and this presentation is a presentation that I've given there with a couple of modifications, because I did a presentation about the history of documentation portals and how the evolution of developer portals and how they've differentiated, and then also what I see next. Now there's some additional content beyond what I presented in Brussels, especially for all of you. with some of the things that I learned in Brussels. Let's get started. So first, I want to go back in time a little bit and to look at the history of documentation and how we got to developer portals. So documentation used to be all about manuals. But that's that was problematic in some areas because manuals, there was very few people reading the manuals. There's a couple of memes about that that I'm sure you're all aware of. Documentation often had issues catching up with changes that were happening in the projects. Sometimes documentation was out of sync with the products that it was documenting. Also, attention of users was starting to degrade. We're all familiar with how little attention people nowadays have. So centralized manuals for quite a while now haven't been really being sufficient as documentation platforms, and that is generic. That's not only about API documentation, but also about any kind of software documentation. Now, the manuals were always, and just like books and documents, were always artifacts because they're not necessarily a natural way for us to learn things. They're artifacts that are born from this constraint of having a printable or a shippable package that you could share with your customers. And the past and the future of documentation probably always was going to be a conversation with a friendly colleague or something that is mimicking that. Now, all of these slides that I just presented were the slides that I had in my deck in 2016 when I did AI the Docs at the DITA conference I think it was also in Brussels. So these are all trends that are not new. Documentation as manuals has been something that's been evolving for a very long time. I think developer portals were part of that evolution. Manuals are still in trouble now, especially with AI. They're becoming more and more challenged. Catching up with agile development was hard. Catching up with AI development is even harder. Although that you can leverage AI in some cases to document what you've done. or to at least create a draft to document what you've done, so you can have code comments. User attention in the current age, in the TikTok age, is even shorter. And centralized manuals are definitely no longer cutting it. And we can start seeing this paradigm of having an artifact, a shippable artifact, as the way of sharing documentation. We can start seeing how it's being challenged. And now with chatbots, and I'm not necessarily sure that chatbots are necessarily the end all of documentation, but these AI technologies as a translation layer between people and the documentation that can help to get just enough contextual information to help people are definitely much closer to a conversation with a friendly colleague, maybe sometimes a little bit too friendly colleague. So all of these trends have continued and have actually become much stronger now that we're a couple of years into the AI transformation. Very short word about myself. I'm Christoph von Thomas, CEO of Pronovix, if you don't know me yet. I'm a bioengineer by education. That's why there's going to be quite some biological metaphors when you hear me talking about this space. My intention is to help you think out of the box and maybe to spark some new ideas that you can take to your work, and then can help you in like charting the future of developer documentation. Also, I've got a little bit of a cold. That's why I've got a bit of a scrappy voice today. I'm the CEO of Pronovix. Pronovix is a consultancy that's specialized in developer portals. We do a bunch of things in the community, like these webinars, but we also run conference tracks and dedicated conferences to APIs, AI, and documentation and developer portals, and how they're all intertwined with each other. So if you're not familiar with us yet, just go have a look at some of the other materials that we're putting out there, because we've got a lot of things to share. But back to the story. Where did our story start as Pronovix, and what is that transformation of documentation that we've seen over the years? So our developer portal story started just before I met Apogee at an API conference, just before they got acquired by Google. We had been doing some documentation work. I had gotten really fascinated by DITA. DITA is an XML language for doing minimalistic documentation. I'll talk a very little bit about that later in the deck. So we had done an initial documentation portal, which was aimed at developers. But then when we met Apogee, we learned that they had a Drupal-based documentation system for developer documentation that they needed help with to customize it for their customers. And that's how we started our journey as a developer portal specialist. Once we started that partnership, and we fully dedicated ourselves to building developer portals, first with Apogee, and then and for a broader audience as we learned and developed the concepts that we've been researching over the last couple of years. And so I'll start things off with a little bit of a history of developer portal speciation. Because when we started with developer portals, this was one of our first big successes was when we won, together with ABN AMRO, we won an award in the Drupal community for their developer portal back then. Back then, in the very early days when we started with this work, developer portals were primarily focused on external facing APIs. This was the time when Twilio and Stripe were coming up strong in the tech scene, and a lot of enterprise companies and other companies were like sitting up and paying attention, like, hey, what's going on here? There was the developers as the kingmakers and a couple of other concepts in the DevRel scene that got people really excited about APIs as a sales channel for services. And this triggered the first wave of developer portals that we witnessed, which was this more external-facing developer portals that were about enabling customers to quickly onboard and get started and start playing with a company's APIs. So back in the day, we were looking at building a SaaS product, and we had some initial conversations with customers about turning like what we were doing into a SaaS offering. But then very early on, we encountered problems because and this is always the case when you're building a product, customers will challenge you and will ask for features that you don't have. But what we saw with developer portals was that the way that we wanted to service our customers, there were too many different requirements. And it felt like there were like very different types of developer portals that customers needed. A first split was a difference between external and internal portals. Especially the last couple of years, there's been a lot more internal facing developer portal developments. But then there were also things like API registries that were more about like keeping track of the governance cycle, making sure that you don't have shadow APIs and that you have a full overview of your API scene. And it was, these were not everything, because there were several more types of developer portals and like different requirement sets that customers were asking for. So then this led us to like we've shared this a couple of months ago already, kind of like an overview of the different types of developer portals that we're seeing. But this led us to develop this Dev Portal Zoo or Safari that goes through a couple of these different types of developer portals. The first one that I already mentioned is like the external-facing developer portal, where the focus is on API discovery and consumption and like time to first hello world. Second one is API catalogs that are about primarily about discovery and findability. Often these are like catalogs that are trying to be complete for the whole API landscape inside of an organization. There's the API registry, already hinted at that, which is trying to be a single source of truth, primarily from a governance perspective, like to keep track of, what API is in what state. Integration hubs that are about integration across different departments and units of an organization to create this integrated digital landscape, which is not only about APIs, it might also be about some legacy interfaces. Probably there's some SOAP hanging around in a lot of the organizations that are here in attendance today. Then one of the next waves was for platform portals. These were focused on making it easier for developers to build applications. So often there was an API component to them. Like you probably know Backstage, or you've probably heard about the Backstage as an initiative that often is used for this specific purpose, where the focus is not necessarily on APIs, but there's some API components. Focus is mostly about facilitating development and shifting down or shifting left some of the work that needs to happen to create applications inside of an organization. Then there's data portals, where you're trying to create a single place where people can go and find and access data assets. Might be through async APIs or through files or maybe also through some REST APIs sometimes. API producer portals, often these are part of an API management suite, where there's a focus on making it easier for developers to submit APIs in a controlled way so that they'll end up under management and to facilitate that process. And then, and I think this is the last one before I have a short intermezzo. And then there's API marketplaces. And in marketplaces often are seen as like a central place where often multiple vendors, so often like an organization and its partners are publishing APIs, sometimes not only APIs, sometimes also apps or other kinds of assets. Like I've seen one telco marketplace where they had like SIM cards for sale. So but like an API marketplace is this idea of a central place where people can come to exchange APIs and to facilitate the exchange of APIs and the usage of APIs for like a whole ecosystem with a clear focus on making transactions and monetization possible. So and if you put all of this together, you end up with 9 types of developer portal patterns. Now, what's interesting to see is that there's no organization, at least no single organization that I have talked with so far, had one of all of these. Typically, what happens is that organizations make combinations of these. Maybe you'll have an external facing developer portal that has a couple of marketplace characteristics. Maybe you have a micro portal about a specific set of APIs that are focused on a certain part of your business. Maybe you have a data portal that is also an integration hub or a platform portal. So like you see there's this mix and match of personas that you might want to address, and this is often dependent on the kind of organization that is publishing these portals. That will what you're trying to achieve with it and how your organization works and what kind of programs you've got running, what is currently top of mind or strategically important. You're probably going to end up with a combination of some of these parts, and that is why we in the end decided not to create like a singular SaaS product, like a very opinionated SaaS product, but instead we chose to build a developer portal platform that would allow customers to build these combinations of types or patterns as they saw fit, as was necessary for their organization. And then AI happened. And so how does all of this change because of AI? And this is a question that I've gotten a couple of times from customers and from a couple of prospects. They're asking like, so, as a dev portal specialist, how do you see developer portals evolving because of AI? And this is the question that I'll try to answer in the next segment of the webinar. Now, we've all been on this wild theme park ride that is the AI industry for the last couple of years, and I don't know how much you are like following everything that is going on, but there's a lot going on, and there's so much going on that even AI experts are overwhelmed. Recently I read an article about AI experts starting to burn out because of all of this massive change that is constantly happening. There's things like vibe coding, MCP, this alphabet soup of agentic AI protocols, quite a few of them published by Google, like about e-commerce, agent to agent. There's a couple of different protocols, and then a couple of this happened just before the conference. This is now already a couple of weeks. It feels like ancient history already, but OpenClaw came out, which was like an open source agentic solution for regular people, not just to write codes, but to help you with your day-to-day jobs. And then there was a bunch of security issues, but it's happening all so very, very fast that it's just really hard to keep up and also to decide like which of these technologies, which of these protocols should you be offering to your customers like right now? And so and because of that, it's tricky to kind of like decide like how do developer portals need to evolve. There's a couple of trends. For example, if we want to enable agentic API consumption, you probably need much more granular approval mechanisms. But you know, how does that exactly work? How do you manage consent? There's some of this is being hashed out in some of those agentic protocols. Like if you have an agent buying on your behalf, there's a mechanism in one of the protocols, but it just all feels very, very fresh. Now, there's a couple of patterns though that matter a lot for developer portals, or that will have an impact, or already are having an impact on what we're doing in our industry. So one of these is that because of large language models and because of agentic consumption, and because it's easier now to do API integrations, or at least to prototype API integrations, digital interfaces, and I'm on purpose not saying APIs only, but digital interfaces per se are becoming more and more and more important. Because if an agent needs to make a phone call to be able to get something done in your organization, probably that's not going to be very, very fun. So like having clearly defined interfaces, digital interfaces, probably, hopefully APIs, but could also be other digital interfaces that make it easier for agentic systems to interact with you in a controlled way, where you can make sure that the interaction that you're having with that agent is one that you desire and that is conform with your needs, is, I think, something that is only going to become more important. So our jobs as the API documentation and enablement departments is only going to become more important. Second, users are expecting AI features. There's this expectation that everybody has been using ChatGPT and Gemini and Claude and all these other tools, and Lusha for Europeans. So we've all been playing with these tools. So now there's this expectation that when I come to your developer portal, search is maybe going to use some of this technology to simplify and to personalize the recommendations that you're getting. And then the third one, and I think for me this is the one that is the most I think this is the one that is the most real already today, is that API discovery has changed because of AI-powered search. You can now just use transcription to dictate a very, very long query. You can use AI to generate a query. So if you have a certain thing that you want to get done, AI could wrap what you're requesting in the context of where you are right now inside of a system. We don't really know anymore how people are finding information, because a lot of that is obfuscated by the bots. The research phase has completely changed. So before, people used to do keyword search, where we had learned that it was a really bad idea to write a really long question in Google search, because having too many keywords which sometimes result in much worse results. So like adding more keywords in the search did not always result in better results. So now we can do this very, very long high context query and immediately get an answer, and then only do like a final trust check where you just check the sources to make sure that what the bot is saying is actually true. And then also SEO. Search engine optimization is now split over a part which is in the search index, and that is probably driven through some sort of a vector index technology, and some parts that is that is in the model, the AI models that are being trained. So like having your very specific token sequences, like very specific sentences included in AI models, can help you with your discoverability. So, and all of this means that API marketing per se, the role of developer portals in making APIs discoverable and findable has evolved massively, and that there's a need for outside-in content. And I'll explain this a little bit more in a moment. So how do we adapt to all of this, these rapid changes? So as I already said, I think the one thing that is definitely locked in is that we need to change to accommodate the changes in search, making sure that your content is optimized for generative engines or for answer engines. I think is one of the key things that you can start doing right now, that you probably need to start doing right now, because as you and this is something that I've heard from some of our colleagues in the marketing space, Drupal community, marketing website builders, where some organizations that are dependent on content marketing have seen their traffic drop massively, like half or a third or even less. And then on the other hand, some organizations that have massively won in the AI search game, where they had been lucky to have their exact token sequence that they're focused on, that they're specialized in, that was part of their brand, being embedded, like, the best ... for ... is ... like having that specific sequence that is their brand name with a link to their website, have that included in the models, with as a result that they've seen a massive uptick in customers that came directly to them just because of AI model inclusion. So then practically what that means is that there's a fundamental shift from developer portals needing to enable this research and learn journey. Like, once I've already decided to be a customer of yours, and once I already know that I need to be using APIs, how do your APIs work and which API should I use? That was kind of like how developer portals used to be before this change, where like there was always problems because documentation was never good enough and there was too much work, and often business did not see enough value, to this new world where the developer portal's role becomes partially entwined with this business discovery journey, where there's a specific search intent that needs to be answered. How can I solve my business problem with a very, very specific high context description of that business problem? I'm looking for a bank account for NGOs with some tools that allow me to receive membership dues, for example, where machine readability and AI readiness becomes essential, and where actually your portal can become a revenue driver, and by enabling intent discovery and by sales and marketing enablement. And I'll talk about those a little bit in a moment. So what we saw about 2 years ago, we started seeing some of the leading API darlings, the Twilios and the Stripes, and where there's a very big team working on developer portals, doing a lot of research. We started seeing that they started adding what we call solution content to their documentation, and really making those really prominent. Now, I don't know exactly when they started publishing that, but I've seen this trend across many developer portals, that there's more and more focus on making sure that there's this link between the business documentation and the technical documentation. Oh, and so we added last year a new category to the Dev Portal Awards. That's the awards that we organize for the community. We added a solution portal category, And lo and behold, the winner of that category was North, which was also the winner of the overall Best Developer Portal of 2025. So there's clearly something going on here. And so, and why is this solution content, why is that so important? So why did we see this popping up, or at least, again, maybe it's partially my perception, because I started paying attention to it when I started noticing it. But why is this important? For a very long time, forever really, there's been this semantic gap in the documentation that's out there about the products that people are, especially the API products that people are putting out. So there was the marketing content, which was about, you know, why should you work with our company, and why are we the best, and maybe, very, very maybe, a little bit of documentation about API integration from a business perspective. That would be happening on the marketing domain. And then there would be the developer portal, where there would be very specific technical documentation that was really about helping people just to execute a request from a decision maker. But between these two, there often was a gap. There's a lot of organizations where the developer portal is not even linked from the main marketing domain. You know, you need to know that there's an API program, or you need to like go look for it specifically. Now this gap was always there. This was the inside out and the outside in. So like the lack of outside in content for specifically for API programs always was a problem. And that's also a problem in API design, because if you design your APIs from an inside out perspective, a lot of the domain language you're going to use is not going to make any sense to your customers. So this was always a problem, but this has become much, much more problematic, because AIs are not truly intelligent. They're idiot savants that, like agentic systems are idiot savants that can have a lot of knowledge, but have, or they have access to infinite knowledge because they're plugged into the internet. And they've been built, they've been trained using a lot of content, but they, you know, they don't logically reason. And so if you ask them like a business question, and there's no connection between your business content and your technical content, they're going to have to do a lot of cycles, like a lot more agentic cycles to, you know, when you've all used these AI tools for like doing deep research or things like that, where you have the model preparing intermediate information and then feeding it back into a model. So like when you do a couple of these loops, it's like the more loops you do like this, the more chance there is for hallucinations, and the more chance that you know, the bot is not going to do what it was supposed to do. So AI agents in the near future, or maybe already today, are failing because of the semantic gap. And this is exactly what we think this new solution portal category that we start seeing emerging can help to resolve, by connecting specific customer intent to business solutions that, you know, are served through APIs, probably if we're talking about a developer portal, but like creating that link between the business content and the technical content, and to create an outside-in bridge going from how customers think about you and what questions they have about you to your internal content. That is what solution portals do. So portals are different because they shift perspective from inside out to outside in. They focus on the journey, not on your departments. They combine different products and APIs to create solutions. So this is a little bit connected to Arazzo specifications, if you're familiar with that. But Arazzo is very technical. You know, what APIs should you to use one of the other. Solutions can be a little bit more flu. Could be, you could see them as a sort of worked example of typical business outcomes people can achieve using your products. And they answer business problems through this content, and they, from there. Now, to make it a little bit more tangible, we've been building a solution portal product, and we've been dogfooding it for ourselves. It's slightly different because our technical assets have internal APIs, so not as much REST APIs. So most of our customers have REST APIs primarily. But even for this other type of solutions, still the same paradigms hold, the same principles about how to make your content AI findable, and so on and so on, still all hold. And I'll show a quick video. I hope. Where is it not loading? Uh-oh, maybe I have to be in the... Okay, here we go. There we go. So this is our solution portal, and it's a sneak preview because it's not publicly accessible yet. What it does, it has capabilities. These are the productized affordances of our technical assets that are made discoverable by describing them explicitly in outside-in language, and solutions that are describing how you combine these capabilities to achieve very specific business outcomes that customers might be looking for. It also has a solution generator, and there's a couple of different ways of, or different purposes for a solution generator. But this one is a solution outline generator, which is kind of like a technical solution creator that will search through the catalog based on a free-form intent query from a customer to come back with recommendations about what capabilities and what solutions that you might be interested in. Now, this, just to make it tangible, because otherwise I'm just talking into the air, this kind of solution portal does two things. First of all, it acts as a semantic cache for an organization's technical solutions. What do I mean with this? Semantic cache is a concept from the AI world where like companies like Google and Microsoft and so on, they've built a caching layer that reduces the amount of queries that need to be processed by their large language models. So if you get a request that is similar enough to a previous request from a customer, then it will just serve the answer without hitting the inference engine. Now, what I'm talking about here is similar, but still different, because you can look at your documentation and the documentation you have published online as something very similar as this semantic cache that the large language models providers are providing, but as a public semantic cache for anybody else's large language model. Because normally semantic caches are things that you set up in front of your inference engine. Like if you're using Gemini, you could use a semantic cache before it will go and search inside of your information systems. What I'm talking about here is that your documentation that's publicly accessible and that is in a machine accessible format, like we are using Markdownify, which transforms the beautiful landing pages that you saw into Markdown content for machines. So humans get landing pages, machines can get Markdown. We also have LLMs.txt as a large language model search index. All of this plays a role as a sort of cache that will reduce the amounts of agentic cycles that are necessary to make the link from a business intent that you have documented that you can fulfill and the technical implementation using your APIs or your other interfaces that you can do using your company's systems. Also, so it acts as a semantic cache, a public semantic cache for third-party AI. Solution portals also act as an intent engine, where the requests that customers ask, like the text field that you could fill in, where you could maybe dictate in very, very long form a question with super high context, that can be processed and captured, because right now you don't have any, like, search analytics has become much less useful. What you need is this intent analytics. And to have intent analytics, you need one of these intent engines, and that could be for solution generation or for business case generation, like if you want to do sales enablement, or one of these ways of capturing intents, depending on what you want to do with it. And depending if you're opening this up to your sales team to help them to sell your APIs, or if you're opening it up to customers to self-service. And then what that will do is it will help you identify intents that you don't have a solution for, and so that you can create more documentation about solutions that are relevant to your products. And it also helps you identify potential new capabilities, new APIs that you might want to build because customers are looking for it. And then we see this, we imagine this as because we've had a lot of customers say, we don't want to replace our existing developer portals. That's why we see solution portals as an outside-in marketplace that sits on top of your existing developer portals. And I'll answer the questions at the end. And this brings us to the 10th category, solution portals, which are focused on facilitating or creating this semantic bridge between outside-in intent requests and inside-out content and documentation about your APIs. And like we've done a lot of research about this. You see us here using solutions, capability, assets. We are developing an ontology to describe these different concepts, and also to, because this is a very new field, to spearhead the development of the optimal way of publishing solutions and capabilities and assets for this specific purpose. Okay, so what is then the future of documentation portals? And this is the third section where I want to go back in time to that presentation that I did in 2016, because then I talked about 3 trends. First trend was flowing. Back then I had recently read Kevin Kelly's book, The Inevitable, in which he talked about one of the technological forces, as he calls it, that is turning the internet from static artifacts that you go and check out into flowing systems, more dialogue-like things. And that very much came through. The chat interfaces, this is exactly, this is very much a flow of information, where we are interacting with a system that is just giving you exactly what you're looking for, or hopefully without hallucinations. Connected to that, there's a trend from software, like software that used to focus on composability as the main design principle, to disposable software. There's an interesting trend that I've seen Gartner talk about. Mark O'Neill shared a post about one of these, somebody who had been writing about this. I answered it because I think that there's, when you're creating disposable systems, you need even more, you need something that is not disposable, and that is like a single source of truth. Very similar to how things work in biology, where you have a genetic core, the nucleus, where information like in DNA is heavily preserved and very well protected. and disposable proteins and messages that are being created from the DNA to go and act in the world around the organism. So there's this split between a system of records that is highly preserved and systems of interface systems or systems that are acting in the world that are maybe that can be disposable. And this connects with this also connects with AI and minimalism. And I did a podcast interview yesterday with Deepak and Ravi, who both work at Cisco. And we'll be publishing this in probably in a couple of weeks. If you're interested, this is the API Resilience podcast. It's where I record interesting, or at least I think interesting, conversations with really smart people from the community who are spearheading or doing really interesting things. And they did it. Ravi and Deepak did a session at the DITA conference in Brussels, where they were talking about knowledge graphs and data and minimalism. So, and I had a conversation with them, and basically, and these are only a couple of things, and I'll still be researching this further. I have another conversation planned with Don Stevens from the organizers of the DITA conference from CIDM, because minimalism, traditional minimalism, if you're a tech writer that's familiar with DITA, probably does not work all that well for AI. There's a couple of extra constraints that you need to think about. So minimalism always was like answer one single question, but like being explicit, like not leaving out instructions. And this is the part that probably changes. AIs don't, like an AI system does not have context. It only has knowledge. So you have to encapsulate the necessary knowledge for it to be able to act. So you need to assume that it does not know what is installed, the software, like what that actually means, where you should be installing, is it a local system, remote system, how should you install it, and so on. And then a couple of other things, but if you're interested in that, recommend the podcast. Probably is going to be two that we'll be publishing in a couple of weeks. And then this comes to this idea of a semantic kernel, and I'll go a little bit quicker here because I want to keep some time for questions. But like a highly concise set of information that is on the inside of your organization that helps AIs to, or autonomous agents to be functional inside of your organization with as little hallucinations as possible. Second is a context shift, where there's a shift from download to stream. Is similar to this conversations, but there's this also, and I promise this is my slide from 10 years ago, where I was talking about the book context versus the user context. Also, this is panning out, and we see that, except that maybe the user now might be a software system. And then you could start asking questions about, and this is where the context management system that we talked about as one of the topics we would cover comes into place, where you can start thinking about like how do you manage context effectively. There right now in some of the tools like Cloud Code and Clawbot and so on. They have ways of storing skills and things like that that help you to like store prepackaged pieces of context. But if you're talking about like a shared system where multiple people are working together and collaborating with each other, then that poses different requirements on it. And context that you might need then is like information about the state that a system is in, that the customer is interfacing with, where the agent is acting. What is the relationship between the user and your company? What is the interaction history? Were there any issues that were filed? What features do they have enabled? What is the knowledge level of the user that is looking at the system? And also, like, what is the authorization level? Because maybe there are certain pieces of information, certain pieces of context that you don't want to make available because they're behind role-based access control. And this is where I think that component content management systems or content management systems that we've been using in for the last decade or two to publish websites and to publish documentations, publications, are evolving into context management systems that can provide just the right context just in time for a specific job. In Drupal, which is, I think, very much ahead of the curve for AI adoption in in a generalized way. So not just AI features, but AI as a platform capability that you can use to do really interesting things with. In Drupal, there's we're part of the AI initiative, and one of the core features that the AI initiative is working on is a context control center. That allows you to store context. Right now, it's static context, but this could also be dynamic context that depends on the user that is looking at a system and the company they work for. And then the last one, and here we come back to the ends, is stigmergy. And this is one of my favorite biological concepts that I've been looking for how to execute on inside of software. And it's basically the answer to how are ants able to act so smart? Because ants are pretty dumb animals with very, very small brains, and yet they're able to create architectural design systems where there's quality, there's climate control systems, there's fungus gardens, and a bunch of really, really interesting things. They're also able to optimally distribute how many workers are going in what direction to go capture a food source. So basically, ants do this indirectly through coordination in their environments. They put down pheromone trails, and they're using the context that they're in to act on the world. So ants are really dumb, but they act in conglomerates together. They can act very, very intelligently. So basically, you have this inside-out random exploration. This is how they find food, and then an outside-in feedback where when an ant returns with food, it lays down a pheromone trail that says, like, okay, that's a good way, that's a good direction to move towards. So I think that there's an opportunity to build similar systems using AI, where AI does not have to be intelligent to be highly functional, as long as you create a system around it that is providing it with just enough context at just the right time, so that it can act more intelligently in aggregate, also through collaborative mechanisms. And here, bringing that back to solution portals are doing something like that, because what solution portals do is they're allowing you to expose inside-outs capabilities and to use outside-in feedback, capturing intents to create paths between customer requests and the assets that your organization is exposing, the interfaces that you have, that you are developing, to address very, very specific, highly detailed contexts that customers are looking for answers for. With that, I want to open up. Only 2 minutes. I can stay a little bit longer, I think, if there's questions. I know there's a couple in the Q&A already. Meanwhile, if you're interested in doing a maturity assessment of your existing developer portal, and also to look at how well you score in terms of AI and in terms of solution content, this is something new that we're still developing. Scan this code and sign up. This is a free service that we do, where we create you like an abbreviated reports, and it's also an opportunity to talk a little bit more about if you may be interested in working with us. No strings attached, but it's also could be good to explore the solution concept and how to start addressing it for your organization. And then I'll leave this here, and then I'll go to the questions.